For all the commissioners joining online, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
I can hear you as
Yeah.
well.
Thank you.
This is Leanne. I can hear you as well.
All right, it is 2:01, and we are going to call to order our meeting. Today is Monday, June 5th, 2023. This is the meeting of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission. Sylvia, do you mind going to 1.02 and calling roll?
Yes, Darren Balaam,
Present.
Zara Darby will be absent today.
Thank you.
Chair Scott Benton,
Present.
Lorraine Benuto,
Present.
Charlene Bybee,
Here.
Elizabeth Flores,
Present.
Jessica Gogucha,
Present.
Sarah Porter,
Present.
Rhonda Lawrence,
Present.
Leanne McCauley Larson.
Present.
Miss Samples will be absent today. Natalie Sanchez,
Here.
Miss Yvonne Allen,
Present.
Lieutenant Colonel Scott Codwell. He might be joining us later, Chair. And Shelley Buchanan.
Present.
Roll call has been done.
Thank you. We do have a quorum, so we are going to go to item 1.03, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Porter, do you mind leading us? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. With that, we're going to move into our items for presentation, discussion, information, and action, or action. Our first item is item 2.01, which is approval of the minutes from our May 1, 2023 meeting of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission.
I move to
Bybee?
approve the minutes as submitted.
Thank you, Commissioner Bybee. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sanchez. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. I am going to take an item out of order. I'm going to move item 2.03 to our next agenda item so that we can have some recognition before we get into some of the meat of our agenda. So with that, I'm going to move to open, or I'm going to open item 2.03, which is recognition of Leslie Alfrey, Student Health Services Coordinator, and Michael Perry, School Safety Specialist, for their contributions to emergency preparedness and response and to Stop the Bleed Day proclamation. They will be accepted, these are being accepted on their behalf by the Washoe County School District Board of Health. I'll pass it over to you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Commission members. So I thought it would be nice to share some good things that have been occurring in our district and in our community. So on the May 25th, the Washoe County Health District proclaimed May 25th, 2023, as National Stop the Bleed Day here in Washoe County. Leslie Alfrey, look at that, we did that pretty well, and from Student Health Services, and Michael Perry from Emergency Management were invited to the ceremony due to their work in training in bleeding control to the district and to our community partners. So some examples, just some recent training that was completed here in the district would be like staff at Gomes Elementary School, Hug High School, Washoe Inspire Academy, Nutrition Services, Materials Distribution, Facilities Management, their Safety Committee, Clinical Aid, so all clinical aids district-wide, and then Student Health Services nurses and clinical procedures nurses. We do have a couple more scheduled for the end of the year or before the end of the year at Greenbrae, and then carpentry and paint shops at Reno High School. So it's really important for us not just obviously to train our schools and our staff, but also our non-school buildings as well toward bleeding control. Leslie and Perry also conducted classes for the Washoe County Health District for their employees, and then members of the Washoe County Sheriff's Office Community Emergency Response Team. So it's really nice that we're able to also offer that training and help the community as well. Leslie has made scheduling classes very easy, so now here's a shameless plug. So any school or administrative department can schedule a class for their site at Calendly, so CALENDLY, I'll get that for the minutes, .com/WCSD. So it's really simple. Staff, administrators, any of the buildings can go there and schedule, and then we advertise that training quite a bit as well. And that's general-wide classes are also offered for CPR through washoeschools.net/CPR. So when discussing bleeding control, most people think of like active assailants as some of our worst, mass casualty incidents. However, nationwide, schools and then just in the community in general, the most common use for bleeding control are car accidents, injuries occurring in households, workplaces, playground accidents, and athletic events. So it's really a good overall community preparedness tool that we're proud to help with. So if you would, I just would like to read the proclamation real quick. I can give you this as a copy for your record. I don't know if we have a better copy. This is unfortunately just the copy that I have, but I'll leave for you. So this is the Washoe County Health District in their proclamation, whereas uncontrolled bleeding injuries can result from natural disasters, man-made incidents, or everyday accidents, and whereas if bleeding is severe, it can kill an individual within minutes, potentially before trained responders can arrive. And whereas no matter how rapid the arrival of professional emergency responders, bystanders will likely be the first on scene. And whereas research has shown that bystanders with little or no medical training can become heroic lifesavers. Similar to the use of CPR or automatic defibrillators, improving public awareness about how to stop severe bleeding and expanding personal and public access to bleeding control kits can be the difference between life and death for an injured person. And whereas Stop the Bleed is intended to cultivate grassroots efforts that encourage bystanders to become trained, equipped, and empowered to help in bleeding emergency before professional help arrives. And whereas Washoe County intends to build resilience by empowering the general public to be aware of the steps that can be taken to stop or slow life-threatening bleeding and to promote the general public's access to bleeding control kits. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value of bystander response by designating a National Stop the Bleed Day. Now, therefore, it is to be resolved that Washoe County School District Board of Health does hereby proclaim May 25th, 2023 as National Stop the Bleed Day in Washoe County, Nevada. So I'll enter that for the records, and I just wanted to share, like I said, share some good news and allow you to share in my recognition of Leslie and Perry for their efforts in this endeavor.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Michael, for all the work that you do. Commissioners, is there any comments?
That's very impressive. Thank you guys for doing that. And to make that so accessible too, so everybody can have an opportunity to take part in that is really extraordinary.
Sheriff.
I'll just echo, thank you guys for everything. I'm still sad that you guys stole Michael from us, but it was a great addition to you guys, and thank you for what you do in our community to make sure that we're prepared, not just for active shooters, but any type of tragedy that we have a lot more eyes and ears that can help. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. Thank you so much. We will move back to item 2.02, which is the presentation and discussion of the planned revision to the Washoe County School District Behavioral Manual to include updates on Assembly Bill 285 and Assembly Bill 330 from the 2023 Nevada Legislative Session. This is for presentation and discussion only, and looks like Dr. Lamarco will be joining us.
Thank you, Chairman Benton and members of the commission. For the record, Paul Lamarca, Chief Strategies Officer. So what we wanted to do is, as we're wrapping up the year, just give you guys sort of an update of where we're at with a couple of projects as we head into the following year. And these focus around safety. And I'm really talking generally about this item, but the next item as well, and we'll get to that. We did bring to you earlier in the year, we received direction from the Board of Trustees to do a comprehensive review of our behavioral plan for the school district, and that's been quite an undertaking, and we've kept the board abreast of our work, and so now it's your opportunity to know where we're at in this particular process. Where we're at is we had a workshop with the Board of Trustees on May 23rd. We, at that point, had just wrapped up receiving a bunch of feedback from many stakeholders within the school district, principals and teachers and transportation workers and custodians and all sorts of individuals, parents, students. We received feedback from well over 150 people. That was individual feedback. We also conducted many focus groups. And so really what this was designed to do is let us know where we're at and where we need to go with respect to this particular plan. Can you skip forward? Thank you. It was a qualitative survey and set of focus groups, but there were some themes that emerged that were worth note, because I do think it affects what we're going to do in the coming years. So very few people were aware that we had a district manual and plan, which was a little disheartening. And very few people knew, and this was true of administrators as well, and so that was a little bit difficult, that every school has a progressive discipline committee, and the progressive discipline committee is really the group within a school that is kind of charged with implementation of these plans. So we knew right off the bat that part of our big problem is just implementation, and so we're going to do everything we can to create a better plan in the form of a manual, but we're really going to step up our efforts in terms of implementation. Some other things that emerged was just a perception of a lack of consistency, and this came from teachers as well as administrators and parents and students, again, counselors, school psychologists. lack of consistency classroom to classroom in terms of expectations, as well as in terms of enforcement of expectations, lack of consistency between classrooms in the school, and that lack of alignment between what the district is requiring and what the schools are doing. So we got work to do. There were some questions around the use of restorative practices, and overwhelmingly among the people who responded, there is a place for both traditional disciplinary practices as well as restorative practices, and this is important because this is where the legislation is taking us. If you skip forward, there are just a couple of other comments that we received about what behaviors might prompt out-of-school suspensions. So this included drug use, vaping, repeated behaviors, really with repeated behaviors that's already in place, and it, to an extent, is as well with drug-related offenses. We also asked about just conditions that create safety problems, and there's a lot of attention to ongoing concerns around bullying, discrimination, race-based discrimination, LGBTQ-based discrimination. There's comments around some of the TikTok challenges that really challenged us last year more than this year, but they continue. Questions about cell phone policies and use. But the feedback we received was great, and so we are responding in kind. If we go to the next slide. So the next steps, we're busy drafting a new manual for consideration of the Board of Trustees. Our plan is to present this to them at their last meeting in June. And we think we'll be able to do that. The legislative session, at least the bills that really affect this work, those were passed and signed by the governor. I'm going to briefly update you on a couple of bills here in a minute. If we'll receive direction from the Board of Trustees, either an acceptance of the current draft as is or the draft with suggested changes. We will make those changes in July. Those will be provided to schools August 1st, and we'll get reviews thereafter, and then we'll implement. So let's move forward. So there were two key bills there were several bills that had been introduced to the legislature, but there's two bills that have made their way through and affect our work. That's Assembly Bill 285. This was sponsored by Assemblywoman Dr. Angie Taylor, who used to be our board president, and she had some co-sponsors. And then Assembly Bill 330 was the Governor's Safer Schools Act. We testified in support of both of those bills, and they did initially have some very different language, and I think that in many ways they were complementary. At the end, when they were both enrolled, they mimic language quite a bit across the two bills, and I think that was the compromise that was being reached. Essentially, there are several things that come from these bills, and that is greater latitude on behalf of district administration to take, I'd say, more stronger action when we have first offense batteries with bodily injury and first offense distribution of controlled substances. You'll recall, I think, that in 2019 legislation was passed that really removed our ability to remove kids from schools for a first offense with respect to those two infractions. It really required a second infraction for a removal to occur. The bills are not, the language is not prescriptive. We don't have to, on a first offense, remove students, but we have that latitude now. And I do think that you will see that we are going to err on the side of safety when we're talking about safety issues. And I would say that battery with bodily injury and distribution of controlled substances create safety issues within our buildings. Both bills still require the use of restorative practices, and we know that there's been dialogue nationwide and within the community around whether restorative practices are good, bad, or indifferent, and they are part of what's required, and they can be used very effectively. I think more importantly, they can be used effectively in combination with more traditional approaches, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There was a relaxation of some of the age-based delineations that were made in 2019 and then again in 2021. There's a real like line in the sand drawn between kids under the age of 11 and kids 11 and above, and some of those restrictions that really prevented our ability to effectively discipline younger students. Those have been removed. There are still some restrictions on permanent expulsion and even expulsion, and we support that. We don't think that a child under the age of 11 should be permanently expelled from school. Let's see, both bills kind of up the ante with respect to accountability, require quarterly reviews of data. Restorative practices really came to us because of rampant disproportionality nationwide. Who gets disciplined for what and for how long? And our data reflects some of the same trends we see nationwide. So I think that the bill sponsors are both very concerned that really rolling back some of the changes that were made in 2019 might open the door back up to bias. And so we will be reviewing data regularly, schools will be reviewing data regularly, and the State Department of Education will be looking at every district with respect to disproportionality. And if they find disproportionality, they can direct specific changes within school districts. Assembly Bill 330, one of the main pieces of that legislation which we supported was a relaxation of some of the protections that were built for students that receive protections under McKinney-Vento. Those are students who are homeless or we classify as children in transition, and students who are in foster care. Essentially, the law had prohibited since 2021 from suspending any student with those backgrounds for more than 24 hours. And that is even in the case of bringing a loaded weapon to school. So the language now requires that very careful look at those conditions and how they may have affected behavior. And when we're building plans to support students, we build in supports to help them with respect to the conditions that might have led to some of the behavior. But I will attest to you, and it's hard because we want to protect these children as much as possible, but sometimes you have to have a out of school suspension that lasts longer than 24 hours. And that's for the protection of that child as well as the community at large. The only other thing I'll mention is both bills do require some planning, especially when traditional disciplinary approaches have been used. So if a student is suspended for more than 2 days, there has to be a restorative practices plan to help reintegrate them back into the classroom or back into the school. Same would be true if they are actually removed for a longer period of time to an interim alternative educational setting. Let's jump forward, Sylvia. Thank you. We recommended several changes to our manual, and the Board of Trustees adopted these changes. What you see in green are sections that will be part of the manual that haven't previously been a formal part of the manual. Some of the material has existed in appendices to the manual, but we're going to put it right up front. We're going to begin with an underscoring of the priority of a safe and respectful learning environment and what that means. We will make sure people are aware of some of the guiding legislation, both state and federal, that really places parameters around what we can and cannot do. Dedicated section around special education. There's really two distinct paths that we have to take when we are talking about disciplining and supporting students. And if a student has an IEP or if they have a 504 plan, it's a very different process than when they're in general education. And we need our educators to understand that. Increased attention to some of the notification requirements, threat assessments. We have had steady increases in threats of mass violence, threats of violence within our schools. We have very specific processes that are to be followed in those instances, and we need to bring greater attention to that. Transitions to and from temporary placements. On the next slide, we are going to be reorganizing the behavior matrix. So the way the behavior manual, I know you've had it in the past, but you probably don't remember it. There's front matter and there's some appendices, and really probably the most looked at piece of the manual is the behavioral matrix. It lists out all the major behaviors, talks about what happens when there's a first offense, second offense, third offense, and types of supports that we would also use in those instances. We're going to organize that in major ways. Also, and this was clear, that people had not, let's skip forward, people were not aware of the manual. And we need multiple people to be aware of the manual. It is primarily designed for the administrator in mind, but students need to know some of what's within that manual. Parents need to know what's in that manual. Teachers need to know what's in that manual. Administrators need to know what's in that manual. And I think on the previous slide, what we indicate, oh wait, that's on the next slide. I apologize, I forgot my slides. There, we're going to have a communication plan that takes this longer manual, which is about 45 pages, and we're going to create a brochure for parents and students. We're going to create kind of handy guides for teachers and administrators that will help in the implementation of this. So let's skip backwards. Thank you, Sylvia. In many ways, this is actually a very simple slide, but I think it's one of the more important things that we ask the board to help us with. And that's really where our emphasis is going to be when we experience disruptive behavior. So first, the board helped us convey that both traditional practices, which really, when I say traditional practices, I'm talking about exclusionary practices, out of school suspension in particular, both those practices as well as restorative practices do have a place and must work together to support students and staff and create safe environments. Now, following from that, when we encounter a situation where there's a safety concern that's raised, we will more than likely lean on traditional practices first, and then couple those with restorative practices to make sure students are supported, especially when they're reintegrating. But there is a need to create safety immediately in some of these instances, and so we will take a more traditional approach when that occurs. And then when we're talking about behavior which is super annoying and disruptive, maybe procedural in nature, in those instances, we will lean more on restorative practices. We will not be looking as much at traditional practices, especially exclusionary practices. Now, I will tell you that there's no cookie cutter approach. You can't just say when this happens, do this, because there's often kind of mitigating circumstances, or there's contextual factors an administrator has to consider when they're deciding what to do. And so ultimately, the decisions around discipline reside with that administrator and their professional judgment. Okay, let's skip 2 slides forward. One of the things I convey, yes, go ahead.
When you say administrator, at a larger school like a high school where there's a principal and assistant principals, does it designate that it's only the principal, or is it an administrator the vice principal as well?
Thank you for the question, President Ben. Actually, it's a very good question. It's typically an assistant principal and or a dean of students who has some of these responsibilities. But the principal is ultimately responsible at the site level, and they have to formally designate those responsibilities.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions while we have a pause? Okay. Commissioner Lawrence.
This is Commissioner Lawrence. Thank you for this. I have some questions, and maybe you can answer these at the end, but could you discuss some examples of restorative practices? And the other question I have is, how and who are those restorative practices implemented by? And then I also have some questions about deep family engagement, especially with safety, the serious safety issues.
Sure, thank you for the question. And you may have to remind me, because I was thinking about your first question as you were asking the second and third question.
Sorry, I asked so many
No,
questions.
that's
sorry.
okay. It's a great question, because I think when people think of restorative practices and it's always focused around discipline, they're thinking about the very formal things, like a formal conference in which you sit down with the student who has committed the act. You sit down with the student who is the victim of the act, or the teacher that's the victim of the act, and then you typically have other people in the room as well, like parents, maybe other teachers or other students who at a secondary level may have been affected. And you walk through in a very neutral way an opportunity for the victims to really convey what happened in their mind and how they were impacted by it. There's an opportunity for offenders to say why they may have done what they've done. There's an opportunity for the other victims and other bystanders to weigh in. Ultimately, what you hope from like a conference is that the victim can help, one, build empathy on the part of the offender in terms of what they did had real impact, but also determine in part some of the consequences that might occur. So there is still this notion of accountability, and that is part of restorative practices. But that is the most formal piece of restorative practice that we do. If we work our way, I'll start at the beginning. Really, the idea of restorative practices is to build community. And then if there is a breach in the community, you use these practices to rebuild the community. So things like morning circles, things like soft music in the morning as kids are transitioning in, a variety of practices, some of which are social, emotional in nature, are really designed to begin to build that climate, build that culture, build that community, so that you have kind of kids know that they belong, staff knows that they belong, and then you have an ability to address behavior if it's not what you expect later on. Some of the other practices where we're talking now about a student who has maybe done something that we deem inappropriate, there's reteaching that would occur, but always with a series of questions so that the child understands or tries to articulate why they did what they did, what the impact is of what they've done, and what might they do differently in the future. So you're trying to build a skill set. If there is a continued lack of response, continued disruptive behavior, might be an opportunity, for example, an administrator, as opposed to a kid being sent to the office, an office discipline referral, the teacher might be able to call an administrator who can come to the door and can have a very quick conference with the student and then return them to the class if appropriate, so that there is a very short disruption and loss of instruction. That can look differently. It could be the administrator talking to the student, or probably better would be for the administrator to take over the class for a 5-minute period while the teacher is in the hall and works with the student about their behavior. And then you can get into the more formal kind of conferencing. There's a variety of things that we would sort of package together as restorative practices.
Thank you for that explanation. My wonder kind of goes next to, and this is probably something that you are not going to probably have an answer to, so I'm just going to kind of put it out there rhetorically. It seems that probably the success or failure of restorative practices is really based upon the adult buy-in. And when I say adult buy-in, meaning the administrators or the school site or the progressive discipline committee or the teachers, everyone on a school site really buying into the practice, because it seems like that's probably going to be determine how successfully it is implemented, or how consistently it's implemented is kind of my wonder. And so I do have wonders about how consistently is it implemented across schools? Are there schools that seem to be having more success with these practices and implementation? And so that's kind of goes along with my questioning.
Thank you again, and I think you're touching on a really important point. I do think buy-in is really important. I think probably where we're at right now, what's unfortunate is if the bill that really brought restorative practices to the state was passed in 2019, and so efforts were made to train in the 2019-20 school year, and we were beginning that rollout and that phased approach of building the capacity among adults to do this work. And then in second week of March, we all kind of had our worlds turned upside down. And it's easy to use that as an excuse. But I do think that the pandemic really eliminated almost all professional learning for about a 2.5 year period of time. So I think even under the best circumstances with training, with this kind of approach, you're going to have some buy-in issues. But when you don't have training, you definitely have buy-in issues.
Thank you for that. That really explains a lot. And I just would say as a comment, just from where I sit in children's mental health, and I think this time has also kind of changed people's meters in a way of tolerance. And I think everyone's brains are a bit saturated, maybe is a nice way to put it. And when I say everyone, I mean from the adults to the youngest children. And so I think it is hard to, maybe more challenging, I don't know, from where I'm sitting it seems that way, to implement new practices and to get that buy-in, because I think people have a certain level of compassion fatigue, or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm putting that out there. I can really see that it could be challenging. But I'm on the side of trying to support the restorative practices.
Thank you. The recommended implementation plan, this is the last piece we'll talk about. Really what you see in yellow are things that have already happened in the past. The big change there is the timeline. So current law, and I don't think there are real significant changes to this timeline. I think technically in law still, the Board of Trustees, our Board of Trustees, doesn't have to adopt a plan until the middle of November. And then it gets submitted to the state. So that's after more than a quarter of school is done. So we're going to work as hard as we can to make sure that the plans have been reviewed by schools and ready for board adoption by the first meeting in September. That's going to be a significant lift for our schools. What you see in green, it's to the point you just raised. The implementation of this is not just check boxes. It's really building the capacity of our administrators and our teachers to carry out these sorts of activities. And so we do have a plan around professional learning for our administrators. It's something we used to do pre-COVID, but we will return to that. And then we're going to work with the Washoe Education Association and develop some training for teachers and other staff members. And we don't have a rollout plan for that yet in terms of dates and who at what time, but I'm looking forward to that. The other accountability pieces that were made formal through the legislation, we've kind of done that. So we will be more formal in how we approach that, and hopefully we'll get better traction with schools. So that is all I have to share about the behavior manual. I think it's important. It's just one piece of safety, but we thought it important for you to know.
Thank you, Dr. LaMarca. I really appreciate that presentation.
Commissioner Buchanan.
Yes, Dr. LaMarca, I had a couple of questions. The one is very specific about special education students. I know that the federal government puts parameters on how many days you can suspend a student with an IEP before having a meeting to see if their behavior is related to their disability. And so in short, we can't suspend a kid because they are acting out and it's due to their disability. I don't think a lot of people realize that. Any of these laws, have we adjusted that at all, or how many days can a special education student be suspended without a determination meeting being required?
Thank you for that question. It's a very good question. When we presented this to the Board of Trustees, we actually spent a fair amount of time in our workshop talking about special education law and this piece specifically. So legally, once you hit 10 days of suspension, any day after 10 days is considered a change of placement. And a change of placement in the world of students with disabilities is a big deal. The IEP team, which is a team made up of the school and the parents and the student when possible, they're who determines placement. Like, I don't determine placement, it's the IEP team. So what you're referring to is what we call manifestation determination review. And so legally, you have to conduct this prior to the 10th day. For years now, we have recommended that those manifestations happen far earlier. In the manual, at least as drafted right now, we are wanting to require those by day 6, especially if there's any hint of a pattern, because that's a big deal when you're changing placement. It is a condition that I think is maybe misunderstood sometimes at the site level, and it leaves people feeling like we can't do anything. But you have to intervene early, you have to put in the proper supports, and if a student continues to behave in ways that are disruptive, you have to build support into their IEP. Unfortunately, that could mean a change of placement to a more restrictive environment, but that's something that has to be done very methodically. And it's not best handled through a discipline plan. Now, it is within IDEA that if a student commits certain offenses, such as bringing a dangerous weapon, such as battery with severe bodily harm, which is a very high standard, or distribution of drugs, sometimes even possession, they can be removed up to 45 days. And that's a change of placement, but IDEA recognizes that there are infrequent occurrences where that just has to occur, and then we have to convene with the IEP team and do everything we can to provide specially designed instruction in that alternative setting. But I will tell you that you're right, that the 10-day rule is a very difficult kind of hurdle in this area. And that's why I was saying that really, if we get a call about a problem behavior within the school, the very first question we ask is, are we talking about a student with a disability or not? Because it's really going to change what we do.
My second question is in regards to disparities with the use of suspension, and especially with the use of in-school suspension. And I know that these bills don't directly address in-school suspension. It's primarily expulsion and out of school. I know that we do by law have to collect and report in-school suspensions and notice those disparities in in-school suspensions. But I know from my years' experience being an educator that even within one school, there can be huge disparities on what teachers are using, how much in-school suspension. And even students with IEPs, they can be in-school suspensions monthly, if not weekly, potentially. Or even just sitting outside in the hallway, not even being in-school suspension, but just sitting in the hallway. Are we collecting the data of how much time cumulative kids are spending in school suspension, especially those kids that are have IEPs or other issues? And are we tracking, are site administrators tracking potential disparities among teachers in their classroom?
Thank you for the question. Again, very important, thoughtful question. I want to go back to your first question really quick because I didn't address one thing. We have attempted to, and we did this in legislation in 2021, we were able to get language into a bill that limited the number of suspension days for a special education student for any single event to 5 days. Because there have been instances in other districts, not our district, where kids for one offense would be suspended for 10 days, that kind of a thing. So that was just to close that up. I will tell you that we have disproportionate outcomes with regards to both in-school suspension and out-of-school suspensions in our school district. Those are race-based. They affect, disproportionately affect students in special education, as well as students living in poverty, as well as students who are CIT and living in foster care. And that's part of the reason why the bill last session, which unfortunately went too far, tried to limit that down. In-school suspension is a very tricky thing. There are I'll suggest purists who would argue that an in-school suspension is just like an out-of-school suspension when it relates to a special education student. So it counts against that 10 days. If a school within their in-school kind of setting is able to provide the specially designed instruction, then I think that it can be loose in terms of that requirement. We do track it. We track it at the district level through our Business Intelligence Gateway, which is a data warehouse which is open to all schools. They can look at that data on a daily basis. And I think what you're going to see as part of that implementation plan is more requirements around looking at disproportionality. I can't tell you with confidence that it's being done at school level right now.
So we're not requiring it.
We will be.
Yeah, my concern is just that we could say that they're in an in-school suspension, but sometimes that can be a class period, sometimes that can be one day, that can be sometimes the whole week.
We do have rules around that. So what constitutes a day, what constitutes half a day, a whole day. So any single period would be a half a day. Anything more than 3 periods would be a full day. And I will tell you that we, up to the 10 days, I don't think there's been close monitoring. After the 10 days, there's very close monitoring. But that often creates frustration because some of the earlier work on intervening and supporting behavior before it gets out of hand hasn't occurred. And so then what you're left with is, well, we can't suspend anymore. And it really breeds a frustration. But it is something that we are going to require our schools to do a better job with quarterly reporting. We will be reporting to our Board of Trustees. We will be reporting annually to the State Department of Education. So if disproportionality continues to be a problem, it's going to be visible.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. LaMarca from the Commission? Yes, Commissioner Porter.
Commissioner Porter, for the record, I have a question to kind of follow up a little bit on the IEP. I know we're talking about suspension and sort of the parameters around there, but especially with the disciplinary action that is maybe, it sounds like it's a little bit more relaxed now for children under 11. Because I know that there are issues where there are violent outbursts with students who are on the IEPs, and there's sort of limitations in terms of what can be done for them. So what sorts of disciplinary action can administrators and teachers take that is not suspension? Has that been affected at all by these bills?
Thank you for the question. No. What a teacher can do within the classroom or a principal can do within the building, especially for what we might consider more minor behaviors or disruptive behaviors, that has not been changed or altered. I think the changes, just to be clear, the changes between 11 and 10, those are really with more significant behaviors. I think you are actually getting at the same issue that your colleague is getting at, and this: how do we intervene? How do we support students? How do we support all students, not just the student that's creating the disruption, but all the students in the classroom? And it can be real troubling when it's a kindergartner or first grader or second grader who is having an emotional outburst and it's affecting an entire class. Really what it comes down to for a student with an IEP, or really for a student without an IEP, especially at that age, is really trying to identify the root of the behavior. What are they trying to achieve with the behavior? Is it attention seeking? Is it withdrawal? Is it frustration? And how do we shape a different behavior that allows them to express that need, but in a way that's not disruptive? And that's easy to say in words and really hard to do in practice. It's about early intervention and support. Our schools all have access to our special education department that can provide some expertise. We do and we will, and we'll talk about that momentarily, We will be able to provide greater behavioral support in the coming year and hopefully thereafter, so that when behavior is particularly difficult to control, we can get in there very early and do functional behavior evaluations and things of that nature.
Commissioner Bybee.
Thank you, Commissioner Bybee, for the record. I think I appreciate the conversation on looking at the restorative practices along with disciplinary and trying to be able to balance that. And I also understand, and those of you who work in the field are experts, not me, on just the challenges of mental health, the emotional challenges we have with some students. But I think also we really need to, for me, it's being cognizant and respectful of the rest of the students and of the teachers, and a safe environment for our kids, all of our kids, and kids who need help. We try to get there, but I really want to make sure we're not forgetting about so many, which is probably the majority of kids that are in a classroom or are the victim of an assault, or a teacher is a victim of an assault, and how important it is, and for us to really, think about that as we move forward, do what we can for the kids that need that help without losing sight of how important it is to the majority of everyone else who is impacted negatively, either in their learning environment or physically, in instances that happen, and always be mindful of that and respectful of protecting those rights in our schools too. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me just respond. I know it wasn't in the form of a question. You're absolutely right. And this relates back to a question that Ms. Lawrence asked earlier, what types of restorative practices? I will tell you that if a student does something egregious in a classroom, it has to be removed, especially for a long period of time. So something super significant. There's restorative practices that need to occur with that classroom regardless of whether that child ever returns. So remember, we start with building a community, and if something happens and fractures that community, it has to be addressed. Even if that child is removed, if several children have witnessed the episode, a teacher was assaulted or another child was assaulted, they are going to have fears and safety concerns, and being silent and just removing the one student is not going to address that. So you are right, but I do think restorative practices is actually the best tool we have, because generally speaking, the tool we've used has been silence. It's just removal and go on, and I don't think that that's helping anybody.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lamarca. Back to you, Commissioner Lawrence.
I really appreciate the question and the comment that you're making, and also to Dr. Lamarca, what you're stating about the silence. And I think you're really right in that there does have to be some kind of, restoration of the environment, even if that child is removed and gone. Because for little children to see an adult who's supposed to be the safety person in their classroom be hurt, that is a trauma. Because safety has to be restored, in that we call it kind of bringing back that protective shield that children can, so that they can kind of calm themselves and learn in a classroom when something really terrible has happened, really frightening has happened. So I appreciate that, and I think that that's a more, holistic approach to everybody who's in the school community.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Any other comments from the Commission? Commissioner Porter?
I just have one other follow-up on that. I really appreciate that comment because, and I guess this is clarification to you, Dr. Lamarca, because you said this is fairly new, that this will be trained. And the reason I asked the question about the IEP and what the disciplinary is for those younger students that are not going to be in suspension, there were several incidences at my kid's school where there was a child that would throw chairs, just get up and throw chairs all over the classroom. The kids were trained to get against the wall and just stand there until he was done throwing his fit. That was the training. That was what they were supposed to do. And I don't know that there was ever any type of restorative practice, but you just mentioned not a lot has happened from 2022 to now. So are these things that are being introduced now into the classroom, giving these, I mean, where are you in terms of rolling this out with those types of incidences so that other students that are affected by this can feel safe and not scared in school?
We're going to comment on that in the next presentation, but let me tell you, and Trish Schaefer, I don't think is here today. She's much better prepared to answer this than I am. We have a host of training that is really focused around sort of foundational practices for classrooms, especially with related to managing behavior. And some of these will focus on just on building climate. Some of it is around de-escalation of behavior. Some of it is around restorative practices. So I think we're very optimistic. Now, some of the training I just kind of said out loud and will be on the slide is pending funding, but we are confident that we are going to get that funding. I think the hard part for us as a school district is going to be how much and when, because there's very limited time to support our schools, and there are competing needs. But we see this as the primary need. And for learning to occur, you got to have a safe climate.
Thank you. And just for the record, Commissioner Flores, I see your comment and I appreciate you letting us know. She will be leaving shortly. She has a conflict that she needs to attend to. With that, we'll close item 2.02 and move on to 2.04, which is a presentation and discussion of the safety measures in the Washoe County School District for the 2023-2024 school year, as included as part of the Washoe County School District application to the Federal Community Projects Grant and the Bipartisan Safe Communities Act, including the use of additional mental health care professionals in schools. Again, this is for presentation and discussion only. It's back to you, Dr. LaMarca.
Thank you. Again, Paul LaMarca, Chief Strategies Officer. I intend for this to be a fairly quick item. Catherine Loudon is here, and if depending on questions, she may be able to come up and help us. And this is very related to the previous discussion, and you guys know some of this. We brought to you an update on a Cortez Masto grant and a Bipartisan Safe Communities Act grant 2 meetings ago, I think, but we just wanted to give you a brief update. I will tell you that this year has been particularly difficult on our educators. You'll remember at the beginning of the year we had many, many vacancies, and we returned teachers that were in central office to classrooms because that was the priority, and obviously so, to have a high quality teacher in front of every student. That limited our ability to support around behavior and some other things. That coupled with really, I would say this year has been tremendously difficult. The last several years were so hard with the pandemic, and this year was not pandemic free. There's still, if you look into our attendance coding, we got like 8,000 days of kids being excluded because of the virus. So it's still a real thing. However, it's the first year we've returned to any normalcy, and I think it's a learning curve again for our students and for our educators. It's just hasn't been the same for several years. And student behavior, as part of that, has been particularly problematic. I think we shared data with you. We shared data with our Board of Trustees for sure, but I think we commented on it with you. Over the past 5 years, when you look at all major behavior, which is a lot of things, behavior's actually been on the decline, and that's a good thing. But when you look at violent behavior, it's been on the rise. And so that's a concern. And these things have affected our educators demonstrably. So Dr. Enfield, our superintendent, has a priority around adult social emotional learning, adult SEL. And I think this is really critically important. We have to create the safe environment and the optimal working conditions for our adults so they can in turn do what we need them to do with our students to optimize learning. Some things that will happen this coming year. We are working with a couple of consultants, nationally known consultants. One group is Pure Edge. They will begin working with all staff as early as August around the neuroscience of stress. And a lot of our staff members already kind of know this, but they need a reminder about this. We're working with a gentleman named Dr. Mark Brackett. He does a thing that you may have heard of before called the mood meter, but he's been working with us on surveying staff and really identifying what are the critical needs that we need to work with staff on in terms of rebuilding trust, rebuilding climate, creating safe environments. And then we are going to expand this and provide some training around cultivating emotional intelligence and really just safe environments, places that our teachers want to be. So I just wanted to mention that because we don't often talk about how we're going to support our adults. We focus rightfully so on students, but our adults are who makes that difference, and we got to make sure that people are working in good conditions. So on the next slide, I just want to update you on where we are at with behavior supports. So we are receiving a couple of our behavioral technicians back. Those are people who were placed as part of that TOSA reassignment into schools. They will be permanent with us, and that's going to provide a layer of support, especially at the elementary level, that will expand what we call our BCBA services. Through the Cortez Masto grant that we presented to you, we are requesting 6 behavior technicians, and we're very confident that we're going to get that. That's going to expand our ability to support schools in a major way. We're really excited about that. You'll see an asterisk there, and you'll see several asterisks on this slide. That's pending funding. But the Cortez Masto grant, that's almost an assured thing. It's just when it comes. We don't know exactly when it'll come, hopefully before the beginning of the school year. We have an intention to expand our partnership with BEX, which is a UNR based group. It's Behavioral Education Consulting Services. They provide some really intense applied behavior analysis within some of our toughest settings, like at Turning Point. They will do some support at Inspire in the coming year. They've provided support at Piccolo, and we're hoping to actually double the amount of support that they're going to provide. So we may be able to expand our services there, as well as with some smaller ABA providers. That actually is not something we're waiting for. It's just we have funding. It'll be expanding those contracts and getting them into place. To Ms. Porter's question, this is the bullet, behavioral training. We're going to expand behavioral training focused on creating classroom culture, de-escalation, meaningful behavior intervention plans. This is really when you're really looking at the behavior in question and you're doing a root cause analysis, you're looking at the function, how do we best support this child? Hopefully it'll help us with early intervention. We are looking at some modules that will help schools with in-school suspension, especially at the high school level and the middle school level, and we need to expand our substance use prevention work. We have some in place. We have an ability to expand some of what we're doing, but we're actually, there should be an asterisk next to that one as well. We hope to expand that with some of the same programming that we'll use for effective use of in-school suspensions. And then we have the implementation of the district discipline plan that we just talked about, which I think is a part of this behavioral piece. If we jump to the next slide, again, we talked with you about this, but what we talked to you about is grants, and we had already made a couple of general fund requests. We're actually pretty confident that we will have all of these positions. We might not have 8 mental health professionals, maybe it'll only end up being 6. We think we'll have at least 4. But, you know, knock on wood, we'll be successful. We have 4 that are tied into a grant where we don't have approval yet, but we have 4 others that we are sure we're going to be able to secure. School social workers, same. We have 3 that will actually be funded through general fund, assuming that the Board of Trustees finalizes the budget, which I expect that they will in June. And then we have 4 others that we've requested through that Bipartisan Safe Communities Act. Again, we're confident we're going to get that. Through that same act, I think it's through that same act, we will be receiving, no, that's through Cortez Masto, I'm sorry, we'll receive an additional high school counselor coordinator, And we will also receive, through actually a grant from the Children's Cabinet, a transition specialist. This is a person who will specialize in building those plans and helping students as they transition from like Washoe Inspire back to one of our comprehensive settings. That's actually an area where we're kind of weak, is we do a good job right at the point of transition, but we don't follow the student long enough with proper supports. And so first couple of weeks they may do pretty well, but then eyes are off and things sometimes can go south. So we're hopeful with that position. We will continue our use of signs of suicide. You've received several presentations on that in the past. This is both a curriculum around signs of suicide at the secondary level curriculum, and then we also do screening with all 7th grade students whose parents provide permission, which is the vast majority of them. We hope to continue Care Solace. Care Solace, we talked to you about that has so far been very successful. Many hits on that site, and I think at the last report we received, which was just last week, I think somewhere around 190 appointments have actually been secured for students and staff, which is a big deal. It's a lot of appointments that probably wouldn't have been secured without the service, but I can't say that with absolute certainty. And then we will be issuing an RFP for telehealth services, both medical services as well as mental health services. I don't know exactly the timing on the issuing of that RFP, and probably the actual introduction of programming would be in 24-25, probably wouldn't be in 23-24. That's what I have for you in terms of an update around what we're doing heading into the 23-24 school year.
All right, any questions from the commission for Dr. LaMarca? Commissioner Buchanan.
I have a quick question. Do we have anyone district-wide that if there is a teacher who's really struggling with classroom management, that they can get specific help and training, either through mentorship or specific coaching district-wide?
That's a really good question, and I'm not the right person to answer that. We do have behavioral support that we can provide, which oftentimes becomes classroom management, tier 1 practices in terms of what you're doing within the classroom. Most of our newer teachers do have mentor teachers, and they have consulting teachers that can work with them. But I can take your question back, and I'll work with Dr. Troy Parks and see if there's some specifics around classroom management that they offer out of curriculum and assessment or curriculum and instruction.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes, this is Rhonda Lawrence. For the record, I really appreciate the adult social and emotional learning page, and that you're going to have Pure Edge and Mark Brackett do some training with your educators. And I do understand that about what you're talking about in terms of resources, about time. And I know that that's really, really difficult. We had a trainer that came through Project Aware and did some work around compassion fatigue and resilience, and was asked to come back and do some training with administrators. And so I wish we had more capacity to do that kind of work, but it was great to hear that it was so well received. And I think I just want to echo your point about 2023, this school year, being a really different kind of challenge. And again, kind of going to what I was saying earlier about people's brains are really just tired and fatigued, and it's hard to take in new information and learn new things. So hopefully this new school year, we can get on a better foot.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Any other questions or comments from the commission? All right, hearing none, we will close that item. And open item 2.05, which is presentation, discussion, and possible action to begin the development of course offerings for Parent University related to anti-vaping education and other topics associated with approved goals of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission in partnership with Parent Family University. I'm going to invite up Ms. Lisa DeCrane to start the conversation.
Hi, thank
So
you.
Lisa Crane, I said it backwards.
That's okay.
I'll get it right.
I'll thank my mom for that. It's a lifetime of explaining my first name. Thank you. And for the record, Delisa Crane, Administrator with the Department of Family School Partnerships, of which Parent University is one of our initiatives. And so brought a couple of things to share today, I know based on the Commission's goals. So the first one is a report, an internal report that we filtered for all of the topics related to social and emotional safety with our families and physical safety with our families. And so this is data that we collect through Parent University. We tie it to our students in our student information system, and then we're able to pull reports like this to see exactly which families that we're serving in the district. So I'll just walk you through a few things about the report. So this is only participant information for families, like I said, that we can tie to our students, and we do have community members that are not tied to our students, and we also have families that come from other counties and attend our Parent University classes. So this report doesn't include that. And then, like I said, we did select this just for the specific classes in the bottom right-hand corner that are really tied to physical and emotional safety. And so you can see, if you look at the top left, we offered 48 classes. We had 949 total, that's unduplicated families attend. Total families attend was 991, and that's tied to 606 of our students. And so kind of the middle of this report really describes which grade levels, race and ethnicity, as well as special populations, and then also tied to our early warning system. So we, in Parent University and across our department, we're really about equitable support to our families, trying to reach populations who have the least amount of access to information or to the system. And so we really look, we serve all families and all schools, but we really try to provide some intentional supports like interpretation, childcare, classes after hours, whenever we can. And so we also collect survey information to talk to our families about what did you think about the quality, usefulness, and relevance of the class. So is this the kind of information that you're looking for? Was the information that you received useful to you as a family? And would you recommend this information to other people? And so that tells us a lot. And then parents tell us a lot in the comments too. We have open-ended comments at the end, and we do a lot of continuous improvement planning in our department based on parents' feedback to us throughout the year. So on the bottom right-hand side, you'll see these are the class topics that we offered this year tied to social and emotional physical safety. We have many different community partners that teach these classes for us. Joined Together Northern Nevada, UNR Positive Behavior Intervention Support, UNR PBIS. We have internal staff that also teach these classes as well. And so just a few things roughly. This is about 25% of our total attendees this year for Parent University. So altogether across all of our topics, Parent University was originally created to help families focus on early literacy, early math, STEM, college access. Over the years, it's kind of morphed depending on the needs, and really coming out of the pandemic, we've had more of an intentional focus on mental health. So we started that intentional focus before the pandemic and have ramped it up since then. So you'll see some of our most popular classes are art classes, and that was really, Maria Fernandez has led Parent University for more than 10 years. She created it with her team and has led that, and it's really her leadership. She came and said, you know, a lot of our families don't have the funding to go attend things in the community that might be fun and engaging, get the family off of screens, give them a chance to just talk, deregulate. Art's very healing too. So those have been, we can't force parents to come to Parent University classes. We can only invite, welcome, and engage. But those are the families that have had, or those are the classes that have had a lot of attendance this year. And so we try to lead too with what parents want, with what families want. So I can stop there and answer any questions about the data, but I know this is the kind of data that we suggested we could bring to you quarterly or twice a year, whatever the commission would like to see from ParentU.
Thank you, Delisa. I'm going to turn to the vice chair. Her light's on.
I had a question just on the special populations. Is FRL, is that free reduced lunch?
It is, yes.
Thank you. This is fantastic.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Porter.
I have a question on, it started out, you said, around access and college, or kind of giving people their options for college and those kinds of things, but this seems more engagement, art, family focused. So has that fully shifted in terms of the topics?
No, so I filtered the report just for the classes that are tied to the topics that the commission requested.
Okay, great.
So total participants in Parent University this year is about 4,000 families.
Okay.
And a lot of those have been around. So we partner with our counseling department on college, the college fair, which is a huge event at our convention center. And there's many other topics with our CTE department, high school options, those are big events. So there's lots of other classes that are not included in this report. And we still do early literacy, early math, STEM. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Commissioner Buchanan.
I see that you're adding a couple more classes on supporting your child who has a disability at a home and also community resources.
Are you referring to our catalog? Is that okay?
Yeah. And I think that that's fantastic that you're offering that, because a lot of time parents, they don't know where to go to get help, and especially with older kids with disabilities. It's, even if you do have access to insurance and money, it's still hard to find resources and get help. And parents can be the greatest parents in the world, and you can really, really struggle. So I think that's fantastic that you guys are offering that.
Yeah, one of our taglines is kids don't come with a manual, so we're here to help. There's lots of different things as parents that we navigate. So our catalog, thank you for that, Commissioner Buchanan. Our catalog, we highlighted the current offerings that we have in yellow tied to physical and emotional safety. And would also like to just have some feedback from the commission if there's other topics. I know digital safety has come up, and we do currently have a class with JTNN on physical or online safety. And that's super parent supervised. You'll see it on the last page. I know in the agenda for today as well, there was a suggestion of a class on anti-vaping, so wanted some clarification on that. I know that our counseling department currently does a lot of work on that with our students through the Catch My Breath program, so I wasn't sure what the commission, just wanted to have a discussion with the commission on what would you like to see that maybe isn't currently in the catalog, and any community partners you see that you suggest we partner with.
I'll open that conversation. So in March, Vice Chair Sanchez and I presented some information to the Board of Trustees, and in return, I think it was around the goals of the commission and the safety forum, and we were charged by the Board of Trustees to do some research on vaping in schools and that sort of thing. And I think this is where it's led us to start the conversation, is what are the effects of vaping. So I think from the direction of the Board of Trustees is we want to see something around educating parents and students of the effects of vaping and what causes and damages it can do, both socially and emotionally. But I will look to Vice Chair Sanchez to comment more.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sad that Liz Flores had to leave, because we had a really great presentation during the Safe and Healthy Schools, during our commission, our safety meeting, our safety forum. And I think one of the things that kids maybe don't know about is that some of the real risks and some of the legal implications of vaping. So I think also educating parents on that would go a long way, because I know those that attended those forums were a little bit shocked to hear that THC does provide a felony to even a minor child. So maybe Liz's department with juvenile services would be a really great help to provide some of that information.
Great. And I think Catherine's still here, so we can certainly partner with counseling. As I mentioned, they work currently with the Washoe County Health District and JTNN around Catch My Breath, and have lots of education for our students happening, and we can certainly leverage that to communicate with families as well.
Any comments from the commissioners on what they would like to see around vaping, knowing the charge from the Board of Trustees? Commissioner Buchanan? Nope, you're fine. Wanted to make sure I gave you the opportunity, should you desire. Okay. Dr. Lamarca, did we get it right? Okay. So I think that, I hope, answers the question around the vaping. I know that it weighs heavy on the commission and these things that we see happening in the school. So we want, I think, as a whole, just want to provide education not only to parents and students, but the community at large of what is happening in schools and how to be more preventative than reactive.
Yeah. So I think the final thing that Dr. Lamarca shared with me is, and also tied to the commission's goals, is a toolkit that are in your goals for schools to use with communicating with families on lots of different topics. And so our proposal is to bring that back to you in September. In the toolkit, just to give you kind of an idea of what we're thinking of drafting over the summer, draft messages that schools and teachers can include in their newsletters to families or emails, or, you know, a lot of our teachers use Class Dojo and other types of apps to communicate to families. Suggested social media posts that are already translated. I know that's super helpful for our schools when they don't have to go search for the resources. They can just pluck it and copy it and paste it into their newsletter. Some short informational videos, infographics, community-based organizations that they can partner with for tabling. So recently, you know, it's hard, I'm sure you know this, to get families to walk through the door on a lot of these topics, right? When you have to choose between dinner and spending time with your kids or walking into a workshop on vaping or mental health, sometimes you're going to choose dinner and soccer and time with your kids. So, but we have been successful at times. So a lot of our middle schools just did transition events. So it's incoming sixth graders next year, and families want to see the school, want to walk around, and so we've been really successful at hosting partnership tables with our counseling department and community-based organizations, and just talking to families like, these are really the topics that we're seeing in middle school that are important, whether it's attendance, screen time, mental health, and so that's an opportunity for us to hand families information. So the toolkit can also include suggested community-based organizations for those types of events, as well as the Parent U catalog offerings, and then handouts that they can always give to families, tip sheets, articles, that kind of thing. So that's just a draft, a rough shell of what we're thinking the toolkit might include, and if you have any suggestions of other things, we'd be happy to consider those.
I love the idea of the middle school, because I know we attended, but are you doing it at the high school? Because again, when my daughter went to high school, we went there first, so that's another. I know in high schools we're dealing with the vaping a lot, so if not, I'd throw it out, not just in the transitioning sixth graders, but transitioning ninth graders. If you don't, you may be doing it.
Yeah, yes, I would say yes, and with limited staff, we try to kind of zero in on like where's our most critical transition point. So, I mean, we'd always love to do more. Yeah, yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
I was just going to say, I think that's reflected into your data too. It seems like the largest participants are in that middle school age, and that 8th grade seems to be, you know, where most folks are and parents are willing to engage. So that makes good sense.
Yeah, and trying to be preventative. And the data, just to clarify too, this doesn't include those types of events that I just talked about where we might talk to 200 parents in like 2-minute conversations. These are workshops where parents are sitting down, engaging, asking questions, we're presenting information. So these are actual face-to-face workshops.
Delisa, I have 2 questions. The first one is, how many of those events that you just table at do you think your department does on a yearly basis?
We probably need to track that, but quite a few, and we'll continue to do them this summer. There are churches that host block parties in the summer that we'll be at. The Neal Road Recreation Center has a lot of community events happening. We're typically at the Washoe County Health Fairs that happen as well. So we leverage a very small staff and some on-call staff to do a lot of tabling and community outreach and intentional outreach to, like I stated before, communities that have the least amount of access to information.
Thank you. And then the second question is, of the topics that you put here or that you're offering, what are some of the things that you're hearing that maybe the commission can support that parents are wanting from the parent university?
Math support. That's probably not some, but for sure math support in the early years is something that has come up quite a bit. Mental health, I think there's a great need and families want to talk about it, and we need to do it in a way that's safe for families, because just walking through the door when the topic is mental health in and of itself is, for some of our families, there's still a stigma there. But we've had some really powerful sessions this past year where families have opened up and really needed additional support. Or I know the tabling events I've been at, when you hand a family the Care Solace flyer, I've had a lot of families disclose, yeah, I really need that, where they look at their teenager and say, we need to use this. And so we get a lot of families say to us, yeah, we're really struggling or with anxiety, things like that. So for sure, I think mental health, I think screen time. I hear a lot of, no, I won't. I was going to just tell on my own kids, but I'll just say our kids are very smart. And even though you can put parental controls on phones and you can do the best that you can to limit screen time use and limit social media use, our kids are very smart and they find time to, they find ways around those things. So I think it's a struggle right now for families to keep up with the technology and how to limit screen time and limit social media time for their kids.
I appreciate you bringing up screen time. It is also one of the things that the Board of Trustees had asked us to look into. And I noticed that on your course offering that you guys are introducing Super Parent Supervise, which talks about screen time. Is that the only workshop that is available for that? Or is there...
Currently, yes. We did have in the past, we had more topics available around screen time use and did a lot of work with Common Sense Media, which is used in our classrooms. That's when our curriculum and instruction department had staff that were tied to 21st century learning. They had quite a few TOSAs, and unfortunately, I think the teacher shortage has a compounding effect because a lot of those folks went back into classrooms that taught for us.
And if we're telling on our kids, I have a 5-year-old that's not quite in school that can't play outside without his phone. I'm literally sitting in the meeting and get a picture of my 5-year-old outside. He loves to be outside, but he has his phone to watch a YouTube video. So it is hard, because if you take it away from them, they're going to react. Mm-hmm. Commissioner Bybee.
I just had one question. You were talking about other agencies and organizations you work with. Do you work on the suicide side of it? Obviously, Misty Von Allen is our biggest resource, but do you work with groups like Forever 14?
Probably our counseling department would do that. And so one thing I should clarify, this isn't all the parent education that happens in the district. Like our school counselors, our mental health professionals in our schools, a lot of times will do things on their own. And schools lead family engagement events all the time that are not necessarily tied to parent university.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commission? All right. Well, it is an action item, so I'm going to ask for public comment.
No public comment on this item, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any action that the commission would like to take? Well, I will throw out a motion. I would like to continue the conversation with the parent university in Duluth in your department, but I really would like to see, like you said, maybe in September, maybe there's not an action required because you already have a plan to talk about the things that we have been charged with. The vaping and the screen safety are the two primary concerns that the Board of Trustees has asked us to look into. I don't know that I need a motion for that since it's already being done. Dr. LaMarca? No. Okay. No. He says no. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
You're off the hook. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 2.06 is information and discussion on feedback and outcomes from the May 11th, 2023 Washoe County School District Community Safety Forum and possible action to provide direction on planning for future community safety forums. This is for possible action. We're inviting Megan Downs up for conversation, but I would publicly like to thank our vice chair for taking the lead that day. I had a family emergency. At 6 a.m., I called her, texted her, and she was willing to step in and fill in for me, so I appreciate you. Yeah. Megan, I appreciate you. It's back. Now it's over to you.
Thank you. Well, just some thoughts I wanted to share in terms of the attendance that we had at the meetings. It wasn't as much as we'd like. It was probably ranged between a dozen to 20, 30 folks, depending on the time, and they pop in and out of the virtual. The in-person was about that number, and sometimes it's hard to tell that when there's staff and other sort of folks collaborating, but that's about where we were. And we've had about 40 hits on the virtual forum that we've posted, so we do know that folks are looking at that afterwards, so that's good news as well. I think to be frank, it was a pretty heavy lift on my staff to offer 3 of those in one day. You know, all the back end things that needed to occur, the coordination, it was a lot for one day. So we would respectfully ask maybe not that much in the future. We had some discussions thinking, okay, what would be more dynamic, a little nimble, because as you know, as you're organizing these, they may be months in advance, and then other topics perhaps become relevant, but we're already too far down the road with the things that we've selected. So there's some issues with that. Natalie and I had some conversations about potentially just being a little bit more nimble, maybe offering this a couple times a year on one topic that's extremely relevant. That was an idea. The other discussion, and Delisa just gave her a presentation, but using some of our internal groups like the family council that she runs. We also have our student voice group. So maybe vetting topics through some of those groups as they have a little more buy-in, and then perhaps partnering with schools in the future so they also have, okay, this is an issue we're passionate about, and we're going to partner with the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission to do a forum around, you know, whatever that said topic might be. So that's generally our feedback, and I'll hand it back.
Thank you. Feedback. Thank you, Megan, for that. Feedback from the commissioners on this year's safety forum. Commissioner Porter.
Commissioner Porter, for the record, I would totally agree with you that 3 in one day was a lot. It was a lot for the presenters. It was a lot for the facilitators. It was obviously a lot for your staff. And I think it's worth noting too, because Commissioner Bybee had mentioned previously that the in-person ones were a big lift and not usually very well attended. And I would say that was absolutely the case in this one as well. So I would echo that we need to reformat either having them a couple times a year, one topic, whatnot, one time, one day, or narrowing it down to virtual seemed to be much more well attended from my perspective when I was doing some facilitation, and keep it in that virtual format potentially, because it was a lot of effort and it didn't seem to be something that resonated very strongly with the community for all of that. So I would agree with you.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Rhonda Lawrence for the record, and I really appreciate your input and feedback. I wasn't able to attend that day. I was traveling for my other job. But I did want to say that I agree with you about connecting with the Family Council and the student voice. I think that would be really powerful. And I really like the idea of partnering with a specific school. And I do think kind of keeping it to a single topic would be probably able to draw a bigger interest.
So Megan, thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. So my question to you is, prior to the pandemic, when we were forced to do everything virtually, were the in-person well attended, and that's why we opted to do the hybrid model this year, correct?
There were years when they weren't, and there was a couple of years when we had a great turnout. So I think it just depends on what's happening in the community, what those relevant topics are, and of course timing. May is tricky in the school district. It's either going to be something really relevant or everybody is just totally exhausted with everything else going on. So, late May could have been a tricky, late May-ish could have been tricky as well.
Okay. So timing has to be just right, and I think historically we've tried to pair it in May because of mental health awareness, and most of the topics are mental health related recently. Okay. Any commissioners on teams that would like to chime in? No?
No, this is Misty Allen. I would just concur with what's been said. Thank you.
Thank you, Misty.
Lorraine Benuto, same.
Thank you, Commissioner Benuto. So I think with what we are agendized for, are you looking for anything from us, or is this something that, sorry, we'll go to Commissioner Bybee.
Yeah. I was only able to join virtually early in the morning because of my schedule for that day. I had trouble getting on. And I was going through the school link, not anything you sent us, and I think I text you, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm on. So I'm not sure if I'm on this commission. I didn't know. I was having trouble. I'm like, are there other people who didn't get on because they had a little bit of difficulty? And I think 3, for sure. Midday is maybe tough. Not everybody actually even gets a lunch, or time to break, So if you were going to do 2, probably early in the morning can be good, as well as end of the day. And yeah, Commissioner Balaam and I were both shaking our heads on the in-person. The one year at TMCC, we had just an incredible turnout. And I can't remember, it's because something else was going on, an academy or group of people were up there already. And I don't know if they joined us or just the setting lent itself to a really a big turnout. But it is, we've had years, Spanish Springs High School, we had this dynamic panel, and we had just a handful of people. And it just is hard, with everybody, working parents, schedules, sports, after-school activities, and then trying to get back out the door. We and years ago when we started these, we didn't have the virtual, and we didn't have people dialed into virtual like we do now. After post-pandemic, it's kind of like, oh, Zoom, we'll just jump on Zoom. And I think people are more willing to go, oh man, I can jump on here for an hour or half an hour, but they're not going to drive and I think the virtual is the answer. And I do like looking at whether it's one topic or 2 topics, whether we do them mini forums twice a year. Fall, maybe, I don't know if right after the first of the year, when people are kind of onto New Year's resolutions and looking for kind of, a way to start the new year, or fall when they're geared up, new and back in school. I don't know, just thoughts. But I did present, and the ones that I attended were really good, and the conversations, and a lot of the online chat, some really good input. I had some very active parents that were inputting some really good, and we've collected all that data on each of the workshops, correct?
Yes, we have that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Megan, I mean, off the top of your head, from the district's point of view, what would be the best time frame? I hear Commissioner Bybee's point that maybe after the school year, but Commissioner Balaam's leaning in, so we're not.
Go ahead.
The one thing, and maybe this will help, I would say is I like the idea of the single because we all know the tasks, everybody's tasked out. But thinking about this last school year and like one of the schools that we had to, as 3 agencies get involved in, that would be a perfect time with that school identifying the issues that we were having. And I would say timing-wise, that one was the beginning after the first couple months. The school district and us recognized there was an issue, and that's where then we could rally with that school. There's more buy-in, and maybe like Team CC when we had it there, and I forget what it was, you get more participation. It's very specific because we know each school may have a different issue. Just thoughts, maybe to help
Thank
that
you.
question.
And to answer your question, I'm just one person, but I see a lot of the events come in. I would target maybe a mid to late September. You want to hit it before fall break because then everyone's gone, but not so close to the start of the school year that it's all the back to school activities and everything else you're competing with.
And from your department's point of view, is one topic better than one topic once, and then we videotape it and they're able to watch it virtually again would be beneficial?
I think it's definitely more feasible. I think it's less from our department as well as the speakers you'll be bringing in. Also, as I was saying, I think maybe allows you to be a little more nimble in terms of topic. Maybe something really relevant comes up at the start of the year, or if it's a specific issue at a school. Mm-hmm.
So I guess my only concern before I go over to you, Commissioner Porter, is I'm going to look to Dr. Lamarck. I think we only meet once or twice before September, so it would be a lot of planning today because we meet once after school. So hearing those timeframes, I think we meet September and then we would meet right before break in October.
Okay, so maybe not, because you don't want a special meeting, right?
I'm okay with it. But my colleagues are very spread thin. They do amazing work in the community, so.
So, like a late October, potentially, after fall break, might be another option. Mm-hmm.
And that way we can get the climate of what's happening in the new school year, and then our first meeting in September, we can talk about what we're hearing and seeing.
Will you meet in October, or not because of fall
We
break?
do meet in
I'm assuming.
October.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't meet in July or August. Commissioner Porter.
I just have a question based on the data that you collected since we had those 3. Which one was the most well attended? Was it morning, afternoon, or the in-person?
I'll review, but I'm pretty sure it was actually the lunchtime.
I would think so too, yeah. That would be my gut as well, so that's interesting. And then in terms of what breakout rooms were the most popular, it looked to me that the securing actual physical safety in the school seemed to be the most popular, just from what I saw being a facilitator. So that would be interesting to note too, to come back with what was the most popular, so we can maybe make some decisions based on that.
And especially, I think that's also climate-based, the year that we've had, the things that have been in the news.
Sure.
That's what folks were interested in. And we saw that in the in-person forum as well. Everybody kind of stayed in the general room to hear that presentation first.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I just had one further comment. This is Commissioner Lawrence on in-person versus virtual. One of the things that I did hear you say, and I think is really true, is the chat can be really robust, and people feel like they can maybe put questions in without being like having to have a microphone or say it out loud. So I think that's one of the things I've seen that I've noticed in kind of lectures or talks or trainings, that the chat has really been a great way for people to speak up.
And I'll just echo that if I could, because I facilitated 2 of the sessions, one in person and one virtual. And the virtual one, we had a lot of really great comments that we were able to get to all of them in that particular session. But it was really helpful to see that they could have that engagement, and some people would tack on like, oh, I have that question too. So that was helpful.
Megan, what are you looking for from us today? I can't talk today.
It would be great if we could decide, and if it's too early, fine, but if we decide versus virtual versus in person, and then take a look at, if it sounds like there's consensus about one topic, we don't have to have that topic today, obviously, but that we're going to narrow it down, and we can always provide a fairly robust panel, so there's that to think about as well.
Hearing that, I'm hearing some nods from the vice chair, so I'm going to send it over to her for a motion.
I motioned that we, let's see if I can get it all together, that we divide the Safe and Healthy Schools Forum into one topic at a time that could include a panel. And we will do our first crack at that in October after fall break. And virtual.
Okay, we have a very meaty motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Porter. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Sylvia, did you get all of that? Perfect, thank you. All right, we have that motion that passed unanimously. Is there anything else that we would like to provide as far as recommendations or direction for the safety forum? Perfect. So what I look forward to is some conversation in our meeting in September about topics. And then also I think we should talk about how often we're doing this. Since this is our last meeting before we have a new school year, I think we end on a positive note with that.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to close that item, and we're going to go to our closing items, which is 3.01, public comment. These comments are from the public, and they're invited at this time on topics not specifically addressed elsewhere on the agenda. Sylvia, do we have any public comment?
We did receive public comment from Evelyn Loya. This is via email. Sorry, Chair. From Evelyn Loya, Teresa, Prince Aldrin Boyungen, Jennifer Stegman, Krista Crowley, Alexander Gudino, Marlon Vasquez Loera, and we do have public comment also from David Leone and Alexis Stevens. Mr. David Leone is here with us today, so he will be providing public comment, as well as Blaze Stevens, and we also have Trustee Nicolette here as well to provide public comment, so I'd like to call her up first, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm usually at the, on the other side there, right? Hello, thank you very much. And my words are brief. What is important to know is that I'm representing the Board of Trustees as a thank you from all of us for your hard work, your dedication. And, I sit and I listen and I try to compose some words, because you're speaking of robust, your conversations were so robust. And it's very clear to me, as I know it is to our colleagues, that your goal is to ask, listen, and learn. And in your mindset, you see every student, you see every employee, you see every family and parent and the community. And balancing that in your discussion, you can hear it. You can hear your passion. You can hear that you ask questions that will provide you information to lead you to make informed decisions. And we all thank you very much for that. I will leave you with one word, and that is you are very responsive. Your discussion that surrounded the topics. You are not afraid to deep dive into those things that are important to you, that you know are important to the well-being of our students and our schools, and you understand the multi-layer approach and strategies that must be incorporated to keep all of our students, all of our employees in our community safe and healthy. You clearly understand that it's not just a physical safety, it's an emotional and social well-being safety. And that is encompassed by the 24/7, everything that involves our students and their families, their parents, and our community. And thank you so much for being here and to continue to develop the 360 importance of keeping our students safe and healthy. I especially appreciate your work. As you know, I sat at the dais in Safe and Healthy Schools when it was first, when it was an infant. And you continue to develop the concept and to know that we must, as a group, as a community, keep our most precious gifts safe and healthy. And thank you for that. Your work is appreciated, as is your time.
Thank you, Trustee Nicolette.
Okay, we have David Leon.
Welcome, Mr. Leon.
Good evening. My name is David Leon. I am a senior at Proctor R. Hug High School, and I've come here today to address a matter of utmost importance, the safety and health of our public schools. Our schools are meant to be nurturing environments where students can grow, learn, and flourish. However, recent events have struck fear in many students, including myself, and are as a result causing widespread anxiety and paranoia. In recent years, far too many schools have unfortunately seen instances of violence and tragedy. The pain and suffering caused by these incidents is immeasurable and continues to linger long afterwards. It is imperative that we prioritize school safety, as this will allow for many students to focus on their education once again. There have been days where I've come to school only to see 4 or 5 people in each of my classes due to threats that were made towards the school. And on those days, it was as if you could see the tension that filled the school. To add on, I feel that the decision to attend school should not be a difficult one to make. I believe that the choice to attend school shouldn't be encumbered with the fear that you won't be safe if you do choose to go. Students are forced to make these decisions at times, and having to make these decisions causes students to feel anxious and stressed, since they are either forced to miss out on lessons or are paranoid throughout the entire school day. This increased amount of stress and anxiety can easily cause students to develop mental health issues that may continue to affect them in the long run. Many of the issues that arise are a result of the lack of help that is available within our schools and community. I feel that many students in our district don't know where to go or who to ask for help, and I believe that it would be greatly beneficial to us all if more mental health programs were instituted and became more widely available to anyone who needs it. Giving help to those who need it can be a great step forward in improving our school safety, and if more people start to feel content and confident, then our entire community will stand to benefit from it. Anxiety and paranoia will fade away, and students will finally be able to pursue their education with passion and a sense of security. To conclude, I believe that our school safety demands attention, and I personally get very paranoid and worried by not only my own, but my younger siblings' safety at school. And I hope to see that we will start to take more concrete steps in improving our school safety, which I'm sure will not only relieve myself, but many others in our community. I also truly hope to see that the students in our district will start to get the care and support that we so desperately need. Thank you for taking the time to listen and for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, David, for coming and speaking to us.
Okay, Blaze Stevens.
Welcome, Blaze.
Hello, School Board. Thank you for your time. I am Alexis, or as I prefer, Blaze Stevens, and I came to you today to discuss the major issue of bullying in today's schools. I have been a victim to years of bullying. It has left me with an overwhelming amount of emotional trauma that I am still battling through. I personally believe not enough action has been taken to prevent bullying in the Washoe County School District. I attend Hug High School, and I know that there, when you experience bullying, you can write a report in hopes that some solution will occur. But normally, both parties are just told to leave each other alone, and normally, the problem escalates. I have seen it. Reporting it usually never stops it, no matter who reported it. So, what are we to do? I have a few ideas to increase the safety and mental health of all students. I personally must suggest counselors and teachers do more mental check-ins. Yes, some people may lie and say that they're fine, but it can also be a chance to open dialogue. It can give the opportunity for people who need it to speak out. I suggest these check-ins happen on a schedule so that they are not overlooked. An easy way to do this may be once every 2 weeks, all students are given a paper to write how they feel. Teachers can review the notes and give any papers to counselors when they believe the student could need help. I also suggest that we ask parents to monitor the mental health of children in their home. They should look for anything that may be possible signs of depression or anxiety. I know not all parents are familiar with these signs, and because of this, Washoe County School District needs to step in and offer that information, either through our parent university or a simple handout sent home and posted on the school district websites. Parents need to check up on their kids. It could be the only moment that can save them. Just as I said, not enough is done at school, not enough is done in homes either. Parents should ask kids more often about their days, ask if they need help, or if they notice something is off, sit down and talk to their kids. And when their children open up to them, they need to approach them with compassion. One last thing, many victims of bullying have been silenced by parties including school officials, administrators, teachers, and even peers. Threats that if they speak up, they can be hurt, friends telling them that they are being dramatic, or even school administrators excusing it for not enough reasons, or just saying to drop it. Problems don't just magically stop. Freshmen have been coming in acting like they are the top dog of the school, when in fact they are scared to be bullied or hurt for being weaker. This is a high school. We should not live in fear of being hurt, so we don't hurt others. Why can't school be a safe place? We here at HUG are calling for action. Hear us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Blaze, for your comments.
Thank you.
We also have public comment today from Evelyn Loya Teresa.
Welcome, Evelyn.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Evelyn. I'm a senior at Hug High School, and today I want to address the issue that affects our education system and the future of our youth. Today, many students feel disconnected from their studies, which fails them to apply what they learn in school to their lives outside the classroom. This lowers true potential of education. The challenge lies in our ability to use the knowledge we have effectively and using it wisely. We need to make a better connection with what we learn and how we apply that knowledge to our daily lives. This transformation of school subjects is not about changing their content, but instead changing their purpose and relevance. Imagine a mathematics curriculum that incorporates real-life scenarios, encouraging us to solve problems that we encounter outside the classroom, which shows us problem-solving skills. Also, science classes can show hands-on experiments, encouraging us to explore the world around us. This will help us improve language, to express our thoughts, influence others, and affect positive change in our communities. For history, we can connect the past and present by connecting historical events to current issues. We can gain a better understanding of our world and have different perspectives that helps us understand and change the future. Most of the things we learn in school don't help us in the real world, which makes school a waste of time. We need classes where we learn how to live in the real world. We need to learn how to pay taxes, buy a car or a house, or give us options to explore career fields. It requires the commitment and collaboration of students, parents, and communities. By fixing this, we will empower ourselves and the future generations to become lifelong learners who actively engage with the world around us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Evelyn.
Thank you.
Sylvia, any other public comment?
No other public comment, Chair.
Well, thank you all for coming out to our meeting today. It is On our agenda, that our next meeting is September the 11th, 2023, here in the district boardroom. And with that, we'll adjourn our meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.